Have you ever met someone who seems to live in the shadows? Almost invisible. Let me tell you about a girl I knew. Let's call her Elara. You've probably seen someone like her in your own school hallways. Pale, almost translucent skin, eyes that always seemed to be studying the scuff marks on her shoes, and a posture that screamed, "Please don't look at me." Elara was the definition of a wallflower. She'd slip into her seat just as the bell rang and be the first to disappear the moment it signaled freedom. She spoke in whispers, if she spoke at all, and a simple question from a teacher would send a flush of crimson creeping up her neck. Her hands were always fidgeting, twisting the hem of her worn-out school sweater or picking at the threads of her backpack strap. To most of us, she was just Tere, a quiet, nervous girl who blended into the background so perfectly, you'd sometimes forget she was even in the room. We all had our assumptions. Maybe she was painfully shy, maybe she was going through something at home, or maybe she just preferred her own company. We never really knew, because no one ever got close enough to ask. The invisible wall she built around herself was just too high, too solid. But then, one day, something happened that shattered every single assumption we had about her. It was the annual school talent show. Usually, it was the same old routine: the garage bands, the slightly off-key singers, the amateur magicians. It was fun, but rarely surprising. The sign-up sheet had been up for weeks, filled with the usual confident, popular kids. On the very last day, a new name appeared at the bottom of the list, written in small, shaky handwriting. Elara. A wave of confusion rippled through the school. Elara, the quiet girl. Was it a joke? A dare? No one could picture her on stage, under the full glare of the spotlights. It seemed impossible. The night of the show arrived, and the auditorium was buzzing with energy. Act after act went on, and honestly, I'd completely forgotten about Elara's sign-up. Then, the principal announced the final performance. And now, please welcome Elara for a piano solo. A hush fell over the crowd. A few confused whispers, a couple of snickers. And then, she walked out. She looked even smaller and more fragile on that big stage than she did in the classroom. Her hands were trembling, her face was ghost white, and she wouldn't look at the audience. She just kept her eyes fixed on the grand piano sitting in the center of the stage. She glided towards it, her movements hesitant. She sat down on the bench, adjusted it slightly, and for a long moment, she just sat there. The silence in the auditorium was so thick you could feel it. You could almost hear everyone holding their breath. I remember thinking she was going to run, that the fear would be too much, and she'd bolt off stage. We all watched, a mix of pity and morbid curiosity. And then, she lifted her hands. The trembling stopped. She took one deep, visible breath, and she began to play. The first note hung in the air, pure and clear, slicing through the silence, and then another, and another, until a cascade of sound filled the entire auditorium. It wasn't just music, it was a storm. Her fingers, which were always so nervously fidgeting, now danced across the keys with a power and confidence that was breathtaking. They flew from one end of the keyboard to the other, a blur of graceful, controlled motion. This wasn't just someone who could play the piano. This was a master. The music was complex, passionate, and filled with a raw emotion that no one could have ever guessed was inside her. There were moments of quiet, heartbreaking sorrow that made your chest ache, followed by thunderous crescendos that felt like pure, unadulterated rage and joy all at once. It was like she was telling us her entire life story without saying a single word. All the things she was too nervous to say, all the feelings she kept locked away, were pouring out through her fingertips and into that piano. Her whole demeanor had changed. Her back was straight, her head was held high, and her eyes, which were usually cast down, were closed in concentration. A faint smile played on her lips. She wasn't the pale, nervous girl anymore. She was a force of nature. On that stage, under those lights, she wasn't hiding. She was soaring. We were all completely mesmerized. The snickers had long since died, replaced by dropped jaws and wide, unbelieving eyes. We weren't just watching a talent show performance. We were witnessing a transformation. The final notes of the piece echoed through the hall, a powerful, resonant chord that seemed to shake the very foundations of the room. She held the final chord, letting the sound fade away naturally. For a moment, after she finished, There was absolute silence again. Not the tense, awkward silence from before, but a stunned, reverent silenza. It was as if everyone was collectively trying to process what they had just witnessed. Then, one person started clapping. Then, another, and within seconds, the entire auditorium erupted. Everyone was on their feet, cheering, whistling, yelling her name. It was a thunderous, genuine standing ovation. Elara slowly opened her eyes, and for the first time, she looked directly at the audience. She seemed startled by the reaction, as if waking from a dream. The nervous girl was back, but something was different. A real, genuine smile spread across her face, and a light appeared in her eyes that I had never seen before. She gave a small, shy bow, and the applause grew even louder. That night changed everything. It didn't magically make her the most popular girl in school. She was still quiet. She still preferred to keep to herself most of the time. But the way we saw her was completely different. We no longer saw a nervous, fragile wallflower. We saw a girl with a universe of passion and talent inside her. People started saying hello to her in the hallways, and this time, she'd look up and smile back. A small nod, a quiet hi, but it was a start. The invisible wall hadn't disappeared, but she had shown us all a door. It's a powerful reminder, isn't it? We so often judge people by what we see on the surface, their shyness, their awkwardness, their silence. We put them in boxes without ever knowing the incredible worlds they might be hiding. Everyone has a stage, a place where they can stop trembling and start soaring. For Elara, it was a piano bench. For someone else, it might be a canvas, a running track, a blank page, or a block of code. It just goes to show that the quietest people often have the loudest minds and the most beautiful stories to tell. You just have to be willing to listen. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to look for the hidden talents all around you. See you next time. The house lights dim, and a single spotlight finds its target, a grand piano gleaming under the intense white light. For a moment, it looks majestic, almost intimidating. And then, a small figure walks onto the stage. That was me, 10 years ago. My heart wasn't just beating. It was playing its own frantic, chaotic rhythm, completely out of tune with the music I was about to perform. My hands, which had practiced for thousands of hours, suddenly felt like clumsy, foreign objects. They were trembling, slick with a cold sweat. Stage fright. It's a term we hear a lot, but until you've experienced it, you can't truly understand the tidal wave of panic that washes over you. It's not just nerves. It's a primal fear that paralyzes your body and screams at your brain to run. Every face in the audience seemed to morph into a harsh critic, their eyes drilling into me, waiting for the first mistake. The silence of the auditorium was deafening, amplifying the sound of my own ragged breath. I sat down on the piano bench, the polished wood feeling cold against my legs. I remember thinking, I can't do this. I'm going to forget everything. This wasn't my first performance, but it was the biggest one yet, the regional youth competition. For months, this single event had been the sun my entire world orbited around. My teacher, my parents, everyone had such high hopes. The pressure felt like a physical weight on my shoulders. I had practiced the piece, Chopin's Fantasie Impromptu, until my fingers could play it in my sleep. I knew every note, every dynamic shift, every subtle nuance. But in that moment, sitting under the spotlight, my mind was a terrifying blank. The intricate passages that once flowed so effortlessly now seemed like an insurmountable mountain of black dots on a page. I placed my trembling fingers on the keys. They felt like ice. I took a deep breath, trying to recall my teacher's advice. Breathe, Lily. Just breathe. Find your center. The music is already inside you. You just have to let it out. Her voice was a faint echo in the storm of my anxiety. I looked out into the darkness, unable to see individual faces anymore, just a formless void. And in that void, I felt completely and utterly alone. The first few notes I played were hesitant, shaky. They lacked the fire and passion the piece demanded. It was technically correct, but it was hollow, lifeless. I could feel the disappointment radiating from the judges' table. Even though I couldn't see their expressions, my inner critic was having a field day. You're failing. You're butchering it. Everyone knows you're a fraud. The negative thoughts spiraled, each one tightening the knot of fear in my stomach. I was so trapped in my own head, so consumed by the fear of judgment, that I almost missed a subtle shift in the music. As I moved from the turbulent opening into the lyrical middle section, something changed. This part was my favorite. It was slower, more melodic, like a gentle stream after a waterfall. As I played the familiar, beautiful melody, a memory surfaced. I was back in my living room, sunlight streaming through the window. I wasn't practicing for a competition. I was just playing for myself, for the sheer joy of it. I remembered the feeling of getting lost in the music, the way the notes would wrap around me like a warm blanket. There was no audience, no judges, no pressure. There was only me and the piano, having a conversation. That feeling, that pure, unadulterated love for the music, where had it gone? It was buried, I realized, under layers of fear and expectation. Right there, on that stage, in the middle of my performance, I made a decision. I decided to stop playing for the judges. I stopped playing for my parents, for my teacher, for the silent, watching crowd. I decided to play for that little girl in the sunlit living room. I closed my eyes, shutting out the intimidating spotlight and the faceless audience. I took another deep breath, but this time it wasn't a gasp for air. It was a conscious act of letting go. I let go of the fear of making a mistake. I let go of the need for approval. I let go of everything except the music. And then it happened. My fingers, no longer trembling, began to move with a newfound certainty. They danced across the keys, not because they were told to, but because they wanted to. The melody soared, filled with the emotion I had been suppressing. The notes were no longer just correct. They were alive. They told a story of longing, of beauty, of quiet strength. I wasn't just playing Chopin's music anymore. I was channeling it, infusing it with my own feelings, my own journey. The shift was palpable. I could feel a change in the energy of the room. The silence was no longer heavy and judgmental. It was attentive, engaged. It felt like the entire audience was holding its breath with me, following me on this musical journey. I was no longer alone on that stage. We were all in it together, connected by the universal language of music. When the piece returned to the fast, virtuosic theme, my hands flew across the keyboard with a power and precision I didn't know I possessed. It wasn't frantic anymore. It was exhilarating. It was a release, a triumphant declaration. As the final thunderous chords echoed through the hall, I held my hands suspended over the keys, letting the last vibrations fade into silence. For a moment, there was nothing, just the ringing in my ears and the feeling of my own heartbeat, now strong and steady. Then, the applause started. It wasn't just polite clapping. It was a roar. It washed over me, a wave of warmth and appreciation. I opened my eyes, and the spotlight didn't feel so harsh anymore. The faces in the crowd were no longer critics. They were smiling, moved. I stood up and took a bow. The smile on my face wasn't forced. It was genuine, radiating from a place of deep relief and profound joy. I hadn't just performed a piece of music. I had conquered a demon. I had walked through the fire of my own fear and come out the other side, not just unscathed, but stronger. That night I didn't win first place. I came in third, but it didn't matter. The trophy I received was just a piece of metal. The real prize was the discovery I had made on that stage. I learned that confidence isn't the absence of fear. It's the ability to perform in spite of it. It's about finding something you love more than you fear judgment. For me, that was the music itself. By reconnecting with my why, the pure joy of playing jive found the strength to push through the what if. That experience transformed not just my approach to performance, but my approach to life. Whenever I face a daunting challenge now, whether it's a difficult presentation at work or a personal hurdle, I remember that night. I remember to breathe, to find my center, and to connect with the passion that drives me. So if you're out there struggling with your own form of stage fright, remember, your fear is real, but so is your strength. Don't fight the fear. Acknowledge it, and then gently shift your focus to what truly matters to you. Connect with your passion, your purpose. Let that be your anchor in the storm, because on the other side of that fear is a version of you that is more powerful, more authentic, and more alive than you can possibly imagine. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content. See you next time.